If you're feeling somewhat stuck and uninspired in your marriage, well, stick around because I'm going to share with you what to do and not to do. Hey friends, Morella here, certified life coach, helping you improve the 3 most important relationships you'll ever have. And that's your marriage, your family, and the relationship that you have with yourself. My passion is to inspire deeper thinking and to share with you life coaching tips, practical tips that can help you in everyday life. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. So let's jump into tip number 7 of 10 tips for a stronger marriage. And tip number 7 is to simply grow up. That's the key right there, is the willingness to not just grow up as individual people, but also as partners for the sake of the marriage. How do we grow up in marriage? Not just grow old together in marriage. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today, this big picture principle about growth and having a growth mindset. That's number 1. The second thing I'm going to touch on is learning how to change our focus and not always making our spouse out to be the bad guy, but changing our focus. That's what's going to change your life. And then finally, setting goals. Let's start with this general idea of growing up. And I want you to think back to when you were single and we romanticized the day that we were going to meet the one and we were going to marry the one and he was going to be the father of our 34 children. We were going to have the dog and the home and the babies, all the things, right? The career. Plus, we would say to ourselves, I want to find the person that I can grow old with. But here's what I've come to learn. Nobody told me this, and likely nobody told you, and it's what I already shared, that marriage is not simply about growing old together, but it's about growing up together. Let that sink in for a moment. Think about it. That's 2 very different pictures that come to mind. When we think of growing old together, that means we've spent so much time together and we're now old and gray and we have these flashes of celebrating maybe our 50th year together, sharing a chicken dinner. But growing up together, that's a very different picture. Think about how you grew up. Think about the process of growing in your family. You weren't just born one day and yay, you had it all figured out. You knew all the dynamics and you knew everything. No, there were growing pains. You had to learn some things. You had to grow in some areas. You went from birth to infancy to toddler to youth, preteen, teen, adult. So much growth. So many milestones. It wasn't always easy, was it? And neither are the different stages of marriage. That's why growth is essential. If you're feeling sort of stuck and uninspired in marriage, could it be that you've stopped growing? And what's that famous saying? If you're not growing, you're dying. Okay, so now that we've established how important growth is, let's talk about how to put that into practice. And I'm going to talk about 2 things. One is changing your focus, and the next one is to set goals. So let's talk about changing our focus. So often we become fixated on our spouse and what he's doing wrong and what he's not doing and what he could have done, and I wish he would have done this. No, ladies, we got to change our focus. Don't fixate on what's not happening or what's happening out there that isn't making you happy. We got to change our focus and fix our eyes on how can we rightly respond to situations that are out of our control that we can't change. When you change your focus from what he's not doing or not being, that just leads to a whole bunch of complaints and a passive attitude. We need to learn to change from that focus to who is it that I want to become, given the circumstances, given the state of my marriage. That is taking an active approach, and that puts you in the driver's seat. You can take ownership and responsibility for how you're going to respond. And that's what we call growth. That's what we call growing up in marriage. So now let's talk about goals. If I were to ask you, what are your goals for your marriage? Do you even have any goals? And maybe you haven't even thought about it, but here's why it's important. Goals help set you up for success. It's what brings clarity as to why you're doing the hard thing now, because you know that there's a payoff. You know that you're reaching for something, that you're on target for something. How did I crawl myself out of massive, over my head, ridiculous debt? I set goals. I did little things every month for years. And it's the same with marriage. It's the same with fitness. It's the same with career goals. So what's your honest desire for your marriage. And it can't be how you want your partner to change or what he needs to do to make you happy. Remember, those are the things that are out of our control. Those are the things that we can't change. And there's only so much energy that we have, so we might as well spend it on the things that we do have control over. For example, in my home, one of my biggest goals is peace. I don't like drama. Well, maybe only in movies. And the occasional Law and Order. When I make peace my goal, here's what it looks like. It is constantly on my mind, and it's what I invite in any given moment. It almost becomes an entity in and of itself. So when I invite it in and I sort of sit with it in the moment, what does it mean? What does it mean and look like to step into peace, to be led by peace in this moment, to be guided by peace, to let it inform me in how I show up, or how I behave, or what I say. The other thing I do is I remind myself of the goal. I tell myself why it's important and why it's in my best interest to behave or to be a certain way in this moment. And it's because I want peace in my marriage. So if I do that consistently, what will my marriage look like in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years? And what if I didn't do it at all? What if I didn't keep myself in check in these moments here and now? What would my marriage look like in a year, 3 years, 5 years from now? It's really about becoming self-aware and being guided by the thing that you say that you want. So a good question to ask yourself is to reflect on who you're being in the moment, a moment of tension, and ask yourself, am I helping my cause or am I hurting my cause? I've learned that I've just got to let some things go for the sake of the bigger picture and what I want my marriage to look like long term. I've simply learned to just make peace in the moments, in those moments of disagreement. And it doesn't mean that it always feels good, but I know that it is good. Big picture and long term, it is good. And here's what I want to leave you with, that our moments of tension with our spouse, those are defining moments. What you decide to do and how you decide to respond, that is ultimately what is going to shape you and your marriage. It's like when you go to the gym and you're in those final 5, 10, 15 minutes of class and the instructor is telling you, like, push, just push those 10 more minutes. That's where you're building the muscle, and that's where we ultimately have the choice. Am I going to push through for the sake of the bigger picture, or am I going to quit now and not end up seeing the results that I want? And now it's your turn. Would you let me know what your goal is in marriage and how you intend to break it down and do a little bit every day for the sake of the bigger picture? Would you drop me a comment below? Subscribe if you haven't already, and like this video if you did, and I will connect with you next time.